Ready when you are.
Okay. I wanted to welcome everybody. We're very excited to bring Dean Daniel Reinhold here to speak to us about, did God know last week that you would be here today? Something I have never really thought about much, but let's see. I want to introduce Dean Daniel Reinhold. He was born in London, England, and educated at the universities of Cambridge and London. Daniel Reinhold arrived in the US at Yeshiva University in August 2007 to take up a post as a professor of Jewish philosophy at the Bernard Revel Graduate School of Jewish Studies, where he was appointed as dean this past summer. He had previously held posts in the Department of Theology and Religious Studies at King's College London, at the London School of Jewish Studies, and in spring 2020, he was a Shoshana Shire Distinguished Visiting Professor at the University of Toronto. Dean Reinhold works at the nexus between general and Jewish philosophy, often exploring how issues of general philosophical interest have been treated within the Jewish philosophical tradition. Along with numerous articles and book chapters, he's the author of Two Models of Jewish Philosophy, Justifying One's Practices, An Introduction to Medieval Jewish Philosophy, and most recently, Nietzsche, Soloveitchik, and Contemporary Jewish Philosophy, which he co-authored with Michael Harris, with whom he had previously co-edited together with Tamara Wright, the volume Radical Responsibility, Essays in Ethics, Religion, and Leadership, presented to Chief Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks Zatzal, which was put together to honor Rabbi Sacks on the occasion of his retirement from the chief rabbinate. That's a mouthful. Anyway, we want to welcome Dean Reinhold, and people can please put their questions in the chat, and at the end they will be addressed, and then if there's time for more questions, we'll take them at the time. It'll be about 45-minute lecture.
Okay, thank you very much, Janina, for the introduction, and to you and to Zev for sponsoring this evening in honor of your respective grandparents. And thank you to the Lower Merion Synagogue for hosting this event, albeit virtually, here on December the 1st, 2020 CE. That is COVID era. And of course, welcome to everyone who chose to join us tonight. Or did you? That is the question. Shakespeare was wrong. For you see, the question, or at least our question tonight, relates to the idea of choice and whether we really have it, given that according to traditional notions of God, he knew you were going to be here. And it wasn't just a lucky guess, right? He's infallible. So if God infallibly knew that you were going to be here tonight, that rather seems to make it the case that you had to be here right now. So much as you may think you are here as the result of your own free choice, God's knowledge or divine omnipotence, philosophers will never use words of two syllables when one with four syllables is available. Divine omnipotence makes it difficult to see how that could be. Now, we'll have plenty more to say about all of that presently. But first, I want to say just a little bit about the approach I'll be taking tonight, because I teach and study Jewish philosophy, obviously, in the academy. And one of the wonderful things about studying Jewish philosophy in the academy is that, number one, it exposes you to multiple and often very different opinions regarding theological matters such as the one we're going to talk about tonight. So my intention tonight is to try and clarify for you what some of those opinions are, and to offer some critical commentary, for obviously I may find some of these opinions more persuasive, philosophically speaking, than others. But I'm just hoping to introduce you to some different, hopefully interesting approaches to this question over the course of the next 40 minutes or so. But number two, and here's the good news, given the differing views that abound, we do not need, nor do I seek, unanimity. So no one needs to agree with a view just because I happen to prefer it, even though obviously that's going to be the right view. Though I do hope that people will either enjoy or learn something from expanding their vistas and seeing more of the grand tapestry of the Jewish philosophical tradition than some of you may have seen before. One final introductory comment. As well as being a philosopher, Jewish philosopher, as Janina mentioned, I'm in my first 6 months as Dean of the Bernard Revel Graduate School of Jewish Studies. Given that responsibility, it would be remiss of me not to at least mention that while this is a glimpse of what I teach at Revel, philosophy is only one of the disciplines that you can pursue there, and we have many others. I'm hoping, can I share my screen? Oh, no, I can't. Is there a way that I can be enabled to share by whoever is in charge of that? But in the meantime, I'll just say that other than philosophy, we do Bible and Talmud, ancient, medieval, modern philosophy. There we go. Excellent. There we see. So all of these are offered. Revel truly is a world-class co-ed graduate school of Jewish studies with internationally renowned scholars who are wonderful teachers, research active, publishing in the top journals and with the world's top academic presses. So while I'm here tonight to hopefully impart some of my own limited wisdom, if you like what you hear, or better, if you don't like what you hear and want to come and argue about it, a pursuit that I know is beloved by us Jews, don't be a stranger. Please feel free to look us up, whether you can pursue an MA, a PhD, just to audit courses in any of those subjects. Registration's open for the spring semester. Classes will continue to be available remotely, so they are a mere click away. So please friend us on Facebook or do whatever the equivalent of that is on Instagram. I'm too old, I don't really understand these things. You know, Revel's here. It's a real jewel in the YU crown, and we're very keen to engage with men and women across the country, if not the world. And the move online might make this a good time for some to scratch that long-standing educational Jewish studies itch. Okay, promo over. Let's get down to business. By the way, as Yunine said, please feel free to put questions in the chat. If I can't necessarily field them as we go through, I'll deal with as many as I can at the end, and maybe also, if possible, have some live questions at the end if there's time. So tonight we're looking at a long-standing problem in philosophy of religion. Generally, one that one could argue is even foreshadowed by the Tanaim. In the famous Mishnah in Avot, our first text tonight, right? So everything foreseen and free will, or maybe choice is given, etc. And I don't want to put too much stress on the text here, right? So without doing that, you can at least use it possibly as a springboard for our discussion, in as much as it could be read as suggesting that while God knows what's going to be, right? We nonetheless maintain our choice, right? Which is all well and good as a statement of faith. But does it make philosophical sense, right? And the problem is that many say it does not. And what I've given you here, this is the official argument. In case there are any philosophers on with us tonight, this is kind of an argument for saying that divine foreknowledge and free will are incompatible, right? And I began by saying, thank you for choosing to be here tonight. Problem is, according to this argument, if God knew you were going to be here tonight, then actually it's not clear you could have freely chosen to be here tonight. And I'm not going to go through the details of the argument. We can skip many of the technical steps. It's just there so any philosophers know that kind of, you know, I can do it properly. But if we just look at a handful of these, right, let's take number one. At the moment of creation, right, T1, God infallibly believed you would be here today, right? That's the supposition of infallible foreknowledge, right? God knows infallibly everything, and usually, traditionally, we think of that as including what's going to be, okay? And we can skip 2, 3, 4, 2 and 3, right? I'd say those are the details for the technicians. Number 2, right, necessarily, if at T1 God believed you would be here today, then you would be here today, right? So God knows this stuff. Whatever God knows has to be true, right? So if 1 week ago God knew you're going to be here tonight, so what does he know? He knows the following proposition, right? X, I can see on my screen, so Stanley, right, is going to be here tonight. And if God knew it a week ago, it's got to be true. So you've got to be here tonight, right? Number 4. And then you can skip all the way down to number 8, right? Which is therefore, you can't do otherwise than be here tonight. If you weren't here tonight, God got it wrong a week ago. That's not possible. He's infallible. So you had to be here. And then numbers 9 and 10, if you cannot do otherwise, when you do an act, you do not act freely. Right? Usually we think of free will as forking paths, right? I could do A, I could do B. But in this case, God knew you were going to do A, so you couldn't do B, right? However it may feel to you, you might feel like, right, when you were about to log on, you might have thought to yourself, should I, shouldn't I? And no, I'm not going to bother. That might be how it felt. You still came. But if God knew you were going to be here, that decision was always going to be to turn up. So, did God know last week you were going to be here tonight? Maybe. But if he did, then you didn't choose freely to be here tonight. You had to be. There was no other option. And that's the problem. Okay, that's very threatening. Free will's terribly important. Yeah? Why is free will important? Without it, you don't really have ethics. You don't really have value. Right? The reason you're a good person or a bad person, usually people would say, was because you chose to do what you did. If you had to, if you didn't have a choice, you're not really to blame. So free will matters. Is it possible then to deal with this problem? Can it be true that right, as we're understanding that, right? Could it be that God knows and you're still free? Or actually, given this argument, is that not the case? All right, that's our problem, right? That's our question. And I'm hoping everybody at least understands what the question is. All right. We're going to look at a couple of answers to the question. All right. I'm going to kind of try and give you a couple of options here. Unfortunately, of the 2 options I give you, one of them definitely doesn't work. So it's really only one option, but we'll come back to that as you'll see. Okay, so the first option, we're going to look at first at Sadhya Gaon, right? And the solution to this problem that Sadhya Gaon gives to us, right? So it's from Emnot Bidayot, originally written in Arabic. I've given you here both the Hebrew and the English translations, the medieval translation of Yehuda ibn Tibbon. And Sadhya tells us the following. So let's read through this and then I'll try to explain what's going on. It's pretty obvious what his answer is. Might be less obvious why it's not a very good one. But here you go. So as we have there, and we'll just do the English. I don't know what people's facility is with the Hebrew. Furthermore, right, see, he's already been talking about this for a while, clearly. One might perhaps also say, inasmuch as God knows what is to be before it happens, he must also know that man will rebel against him. But in that case, it would be impossible for man not to rebel, since otherwise what God foreknows would not be realized. That's basically the statement of the problem that we've just explained. And here's his answer. The resolution of this doubt, however, is more obvious than even that of the first one. He's already given us a problem, right? He's dealt with that one. This one he thinks is a slam dunk, right? This is an easy one. Why? It need not be pointed out, says Sadhya, that the person who makes the above-mentioned assertion is really unable to prove that the Creator's foreknowledge of things is the cause of their coming into being. His assertion is therefore nothing else than an erroneous assumption or deliberate invention, right? What is Sadhya's solution here? Sadhya's solution is, look, I know that God knows you're going to do it, but God's knowledge of that isn't causing it to be the case, right? Just because God knows it doesn't mean he's making it so, right? He's not somehow causally forcing you into this. He just happens to know, right? One of the analogies that's often used here is that right now, okay, right now you're all looking at a screen, right? So you right now, you know that, for example, if I'm on your screen, I don't know, but if I'm on your screen, you are seeing me before you. So you know I'm before you, right? You know that. You're not making it happen though, are you? Right? Just because you know it, you're not making my presence here. You're not causing it. You just happen to be there and you're seeing it. So surely it's possible to know something without causing it. So it's said. And ditto for God, right? So God knows you, but he's not making it happen. Initially, to many people, that sounds like a plausible solution, right? Have free will, have divine foreknowledge. God isn't making it happen. He's not causing it. It's all good. Problem is it doesn't work, right? The reason it doesn't work is that it's confusing two different problems, right? Because there are two different problems of free will. One of those, very prevalent today, is the challenge that is often attributed to our greater scientific knowledge of the world. It's a form of causal determinism, right? So the idea being that somehow, whether it's physically, psychologically, genetically, right, whatever it might be, all of our acts are necessary consequences of our history to that point, right? Everything is just cause and effect, a mechanical chain. Physical world works in accordance with those laws. Human beings are no different. So are we free? No, right? Everything we do is simply a function of what I just did, which caused it. And that was caused by what happened just before, which was caused by what has happened before, and so on and so forth. And there are many different ways of couching this, whether in terms of physics and atoms, like I say, or whether in terms of psychology, genetics, whatever it might be. Okay, here's a pencil. If I let go of this pencil, you know what's going to happen, right? Laws of nature, cause and effect. There you go. It drops. Same with human action. That's the challenge that contemporary understandings, whether it's of physics or psychology or whatever it might be, lay at our door regarding free will. And that's a real, it's a problem. It's a question. It's not our question, right? But it is a problem and a question. It's not the one we're dealing with tonight, because our question's very different. Our question's about God's foreknowledge, right? As I said at the beginning, he knows truths. He knew a certain truth a week ago, right? He knew that Oren was going to be here tonight, okay? He knew it a week ago. So it was true a week ago already. So, therefore, Oren, sorry, wrong religious authority, but here you stand, you can do no other, right? If God knew it, then it had to be. Two very different problems, and Sadhya seems to confuse them. Right? What do I mean he seems to confuse them? I want you to imagine that causal determinism isn't true. You might not have to imagine it. You might many of us believe that it's not, right? So let's say causal determinism isn't true. It's not cause, effect, right? So let's get rid of that one. It's not true. Would God still know that you were going to be here tonight? All right? Now, I assume everyone would say yes. Right? The reason God knows here tonight isn't because he's sitting there doing calculation, cause, effect. Is Lawrence going to turn up? Oh, they'll cause, right? That's not how he works these things out. Yeah, he's not sitting there doing the causal calculations. Yeah. So he would know anyway. And therefore, it doesn't matter whether he's making it happen. Doesn't matter if he's causing it through kind of causation, push-pull. We have this kind of push-pull mechanical notion, causation, things bumping into each other, right? God is not making it happen. Sadhya could well be right on that. But that doesn't change the fact that he knew you were going to be here, which means it was true, which means you could not have been here, which means you're not free, right? Sadhya's confusing two different issues. God knows, not a problem, he's not making it happen. To which the response is, you're right, he's not making it happen. But that doesn't change the fact that if he knows it's going to, and you could not do anything else. So Sadhya's solution, I'm afraid, doesn't really seem to work. God knows in his unique godly fashion, not dependent in any way on causes and effects. So fine, let's say he's not making it happen. Let's say nothing's making it happen. He'd still know. So it would still be true. And therefore, this is not an answer. So, to summarize the story so far, right? We have apparently a problem, right? Free will foreknowledge. Did God know you were going to be here tonight? Well, according to Sadhya, yes, he did, right? He knew you were going to be here. Problem is that if he knew you were going to be here, we're back with our free will problem, yeah? And he thinks there's no conflict, there's no problem. He can know, and you're still free of not making it happen. Problem is he's wrong, right? It's just not a solution to our problem. Our problem, God knows, that's our problem. That problem he hasn't really addressed, okay? I hope that's clear. We follow what the solution is and why it doesn't work. Okay. Now, you might justifiably at this point say, how dare this snooty Englishman say Sadhya Gaon is wrong? Who's he to say such things? You would be right. But I'm not just saying that. Yeah, I have a Rynhold who also thinks he's wrong. All right, and that's Rynhold. And Rynhold, who kind of, a fair bit later, about 3.5 centuries on, right? Sadhya Gaon lives from 882 to 942 in Babylonia, in kind of what is now to us kind of, Baghdad. Rynhold, later in Provence, in South France, from 1288 to 1344. And Rynhold also thinks that Sadhya has not solved the problem. Right, more than that, Rynhold thinks it's a real problem, okay? So I'm just going to begin by giving you a little bit of background on Rynhold that will set us up for looking at his solution to this problem, all right? So the first thing to state that is important, Rynhold did think, Rynhold, by the way, Levi ben Gershon, Gersonides, right, otherwise known as. Also, if you never remember anything I ever said tonight, the one thing you will remember is this, right? He is one of only, I think, 2 rabbis with a crater on the moon named after him, okay? Fun fact. He was a great astronomer, and he created an instrument called Jacob's Ladder, which was for measuring distances of planets, and therefore there is a crater on the moon called Rabbi Levi after him. There you go, right? You won't forget that. So, Rynhold, okay, very important. He did think, to start with, that determinism is largely true, right? He believed that most human action is just following causal determination, and the causal determination he believed in was astrological, right? He believed in, as most people did in that period, Rambam is often held up as, the one who didn't, but he really was one of the few who didn't, right? Most of them believe in astrology. This is Rynhold's argument for reading People magazine, right? Those horoscopes, you should be studying that, okay? Things are on the whole determined, right? There's astral determination. So if you are born when Venus is in the ascendant, I'm just making that up, I don't know if it's even a real thing, right? But it sounds right, yeah? That means you're going to be this kind of person, and that means that this is how you will generally, the way things will generally go, right? Cause and effect. But, according to Rynhold, human beings have the ability to subvert their astrological fate, right? We can break out of that causal chain because we have the power of intellect, right? So even though it is the case that if I just went along unthinkingly, I would probably follow my fate, my determined fate, I have the ability, human beings have the ability to break out of those chains, right, and to subvert it. So it's very important that for Rynhold, albeit many, many acts are causally determined, right, there is still free will where you can break out of that. Okay. So what that means in roll bug language that we're about to look at inside is that many things in the world are a result of causes necessitating effects, right? So they are necessary, part of the causal order. However, human beings do have the ability to choose something other than their fate. We have a measure of freedom. And that means that human actions are what he calls a contingent matter, right? Contingent, meaning, you know, might be, might not be, right? It will depend, right? So necessity with a bit of contingency thrown in. What does all that mean, as far as our bug's concerned, for divine knowledge and whether he knew whether you were going to be here tonight? Well, here we go. All right, this is from his Milhamot Hashem, book 3, part 4. Again, this one actually originally, this was one of the first major works written in medieval philosophical Hebrew. At this point in Provence, they start actually writing original works in Hebrew. Here we'll straight to the translation. He says the following. It has been previously shown, says Ralbug, that these particulars, all right, particulars here just refers to particular things or events, right? This pencil is a particular, there is the concept of pencil, there are two pencils, two particular pencils, right? Particulars being particular objects, particular things, particular events, right? Single things that we can identify. So he says it's previously been shown these things are ordered and determined in one sense, yet contingent in another sense. Accordingly, it is evident that the sense in which God knows these particulars is the sense in which they are ordered and determined, for from this aspect, it's possible to have knowledge of them. On the other hand, the sense in which God does not know particulars is the sense in which they are not ordered, the sense in which they are contingent, for in the latter sense, knowledge of them is not possible. Right? However, God does know from this aspect that these events may not occur because of the choice which he has given man to compensate for the deficiencies in the supervision coming from the heavenly bodies, as has been explained in Book 2. Right? He does not know which of the contradictory outcomes will be realized insofar as they are genuinely contingent affairs, for if he did, there would not be any contingency at all. And we'll just pause there. Right? What is Ralbug saying? He's saying, look, on the whole, things are ordered and determined, yeah, by the planets and by astrology. These things are ordered, they are determined, and God knows that. So God does know that somebody who is born under a certain constellation generally does X. That's what he knows. But what he doesn't know, right, is whether or not any particular individual born under that constellation goes ahead and does that thing. Right? So it might be that given the laws of human psychology and all of that, you know, a middle-aged Englishman who happens to be a philosopher who moved to America, kind of thing he does, because, you know, this is what Pisces fish do, is give talks on December the 1st, given the constellations, right, on free will to hosted by a synagogue in Lower Mary. Right? That's the kind of thing people do, right? Of my ilk. What God doesn't know is whether or not I actually did that. Yeah, might have done, might not have done. Contingent. What God knows are all the laws, all the general laws. What he doesn't know, okay, he does not know, says that, which of the contradictory outcomes will be realized because they're contingent. And if he did, there would not be any contingency at all. Ralbug accepts the terms of the problem. He really does believe that you can't do the Sadyagam thing. If God knows, free will's out the window. Right? If God does know, there is no free will. But it's okay for him. God doesn't, so you're free. It's all good. Right? But God doesn't therefore actually know in advance, right, what it is that you were going to do. According to Ralbug, did God know last week that you would be here tonight? The answer is no. Right? And I should just for, I guess, full disclosure, in truth, Rynhold's view is much more extreme than that, right? It's not that he doesn't know the future. God doesn't know any particulars at all. He doesn't know you're sitting here right now, doesn't know you were born, right? Rynhold has a very extreme view on this. That was controversial, right? Obviously. He doesn't believe, but one shock's enough for the night. We'll just go with God not knowing the future, and we'll leave the heavy duty stuff aside, right? And you can divorce the two, right? You could take the view theologically that God knows what's going on, but he doesn't know the future, right? One could, that's a possible view, and we will utilize Rynhold for those purposes tonight, so we don't have to get into the even more extreme stuff, right? So God didn't know you're going to be here tonight. And the problem that many people raise immediately with that is, but hold on a minute, then surely God is imperfect, right? I thought God's meant to be all-knowing. Doesn't God know stuff? But if he doesn't know that you are going to be here tonight, then he's imperfect, no? Right? Rynhold obviously knows that this will be the objection, so he continues here. Nevertheless, hopefully you can see my cursor. This is where we are. Nevertheless, the fact that God does not have the knowledge of which possible outcome will be realized does not imply any defect in God. May he be blessed. For perfect knowledge of something is the knowledge of what that thing is in reality. When the thing is not apprehended as it is, this is error, not knowledge. Hence, God knows these things in the best manner possible. For he knows them insofar as they are ordered in a determinate and certain way, and he knows, in addition, that these events are contingent, insofar as they fall within the domain of human choice, as such knows them truly as contingent. Okay? What is he saying here? What is he telling us? On the one hand, the way he puts it there is quite colloquial. Yeah? God doesn't know. Why? Well, because to know it truly is to know it could go either way, right? That's to genuinely know about the, right? A week ago, he thinks, you know, Stephen will or won't be there, right? Could go either way. That's genuine knowledge, right? If the event is genuinely free contingent, then to know it as such is to know could go either way, right? That's a kind of colloquial answer. But there's actually a much more kind of, let's say, philosophical answer, right, to why it is that he doesn't think this is a problem for divine perfection. And it's kind of analogous to another of the divine attributes, okay? So, God, other than being omniscient, right, and knowing everything there is to know, is also omnipotent, right? He has the power to do anything and everything, right? I think I mistakenly used omnipotence for omniscience at the beginning, actually, which was, must have been half asleep. But, right, divine omniscience is to know everything. Divine omnipotence is to have the power to do anything, right? The vast, vast majority of philosophers do not believe that God can subvert the laws of logic, right? So they don't think that God could make, for example, a square circle, right? Whether that's laws of logic or not is actually questionable, but either way, right? It's impossible, right? What does it mean? A square circle is kind of contradiction in terms. So most people say he can't do it, but then he's not omnipotent, the objection goes. To which the response is, no, 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 he can do everything that's doable, right? There are things that simply, by definition, aren't doable. If it's doable, God can do it. That's omnipotence, okay? Similarly, that's the case with omniscience. God knows everything that is knowable, right? As with omnipotence, can do everything that is doable. Rynhold believes that the future is simply not knowable, right? The future just isn't knowable. And the reason for that is, if we take as an example, right? So let's transport ourselves back to last week, right? And let us imagine the statement, Janina Jacobson is going to be, right, online at this Zoom a week today, right? So this time last week, that's the statement, right? Janina's going to be here at this time today. That statement is true right now, right? Because indeed Janina is here, so it's true. But at the time, was it true when it was said back then? Or did it only become true now? Okay. This is a question that goes all the way back to Aristotle in logic. Okay. The question of whether statements about the future have what we as philosophers call truth values, right? Every statement's either true or false. Yeah, well, maybe not every statement, right? Certain statements might be neither true nor false. And one candidate, one set of or category of candidates for that are statements about the future, right? When you actually say, X will be wherever, when you say it, is it at that point in time already, say, true, right? Okay, if somebody said, I don't know, Paul McCartney will be at Daniel Reinhold's Zoom presentation. They said it last week, Tuesday night. Was it false, unless he's going by another name and isn't showing his video? I'm assuming he's not here, right? Was it false when it was said a week ago already, or did it just become false tonight, albeit predictable, right? But was it false then? Yeah. If statements about the future don't have truth values, they're neither true nor are they false, then they are unknowable. So the fact God doesn't know them doesn't in any way impugn his omniscience. All right. And Rynhold does indeed believe that. So in one of his non-Jewish philosophical works, his super commentary on Averroes' commentary on Aristotle's interpretation, he writes the following, right? With respect to future contingencies, for example, Reuben will go tomorrow or Reuben will not go tomorrow. Yeah. Says Rynhold, such statements do not divide the true and the false determinately. For in these propositions, one or the other of them will be true, but it's not determinately known now which of them is true. When the time arrives, one of them is true, the other is false. Right? Rynhold believed statements about the future are unknowable. They do not have truth value. So the fact God does not know them isn't a problem, right? Doesn't call into question his perfection. Right. So, according to Rynhold, God did not know last week that you would be here tonight. All right. And there are people for whom that's seen to be distressing, right? The idea that God doesn't have foreknowledge is taken to be somehow problematic. I'm not, I have to admit, entirely sure why. Okay. For God to maybe, for God to know what's going on in the present, right? Maybe that matters, right? You could see why people would be concerned with that. To know the future, right? A lot of people always bring in providence here. Well, if he doesn't know the future, he can't do whatever it might be. Not actually the case, right? Divine omniscience is very bad for providence. Because if God already knew in the past that something was going to happen, then he can't providentially change it because he already knew it, right? So actually it doesn't quite work, providence omniscience thing, but that's getting into other issues. Point is that according to Rynhold, right, did God know? Well, what he did know, right, what God did know at that point in time, since the beginning of creation and all eternity, frankly, is the general principle that, you know, intelligent, decent, good people who live in Lower Merion go to fabulous philosophy lectures. That's what he knows, that general rule and principle that he knows, right? Did he know that any one of you, or indeed me, right, were going to be here tonight? Well, no. But at least that means it was a result of your own good judgment. And for that, I commend you. And maybe with that, I'll turn my attention to some of the chat and the questions to see if they're. So we have supposition of infallible foreknowledge. Why do we suppose this, and why would God be less of a God if he did not have this foreknowledge? Indeed, I'm with you. As I said at the end, I'm not sure it's as problematic to assume that he doesn't have foreknowledge as maybe we might instinctively think, right? And what have we got there? Hello, Chaim. Nice to see you. In the Middle Ages, this was a question for Jewish philosophy. Today, this is what sci-fi time travel alternate media think. Yes, indeed. It is, as I mentioned, the kind of sci-fi causal determinism problems, or the multiverse, which allows for all these different things, yeah, which is actually very dangerous. I've got a second cousin, my first cousin's son in Israel, who watched something about the multiverse on TV. He's young, he's like, you know, maybe he was 12, 13 or something. And he'd watched a documentary the night before on the multiverse, right? And apparently when he got to school, his teacher asked if he dove and shukar it, right? And he said, well, even if I haven't, in another universe I did, so why does it matter? So multiverse, dangerous, but very clever for a 13-year-old to think of that. Anyway, it is true that scientifically, the scientific challenge is much more prevalent, and that's become a kind of more of a scientific concern. My colleague and mentor in many ways, David Schatz, kind of noted to me earlier today, and he's noted this also in writing, that people do feel very threatened often by causal determinism, by the idea that we're somehow, whether it's physically, psychologically determined. He says, it's funny though, nobody sits and worries, oh my goodness, if there's a God, I don't have free will, right? We just don't worry about that. Back then, they did. In the Middle Ages, that was the driving kind of concern. And I think that's just because of more of a theocentric approach, right? They're concerned about God's knowledge and God's perfection, whereas I think we're a bit more anthropocentric today, right? More concerned with things from our human perspective, so we get more worried about the scientific thing. But I think, you know, that's therefore a very salient observation. Okay, let us see. Israel, whether God's knowledge is not all-encompassing? Yes. Rambam would strongly disagree, probably, though, you know, notoriously interpreting Rambam's philosophy is a matter of great controversy. Right? The one uncontroversial thing I can say to you tonight about the Rambam is anything I say about the Rambam will be controversial. Someone somewhere will definitely contradict it. Good question. Hello. I
disagree with that.
Yeah. How does Nevuah fit into this scheme? All right. It's really interesting, actually. At the beginning of book 2 of Milchamat Hashem, Rynhold brings this up, and he basically says, how is Nevuah compatible with free will? Right? If I'm a Navi and I'm predicting, then surely it must be because I'm predicting something that's going to happen. If it's going to happen, do I have free will? Right? So it is a good question. Now, Rynhold's version of prophecy is such that it is compatible, because the kind of knowledge that prophets tap into is the kind of knowledge God has. Right, so it's in general, people like this will do this, yeah. And of course, certainly when it comes to negative prophecy, so to speak, right, bad things going to happen, they're basically warning you that if you don't, you know, knuckle down, then you are fated for whatever, because if you don't overcome your natural astral determinants, then bad stuff's going to happen. Either it does or it doesn't, and you know, so it's a warning in that sense. But effectively, for him, Nevuah does sort of follow the same model as divine knowledge, and that the whole thing there, and therefore also asked, how is God different from human beings? Well, God has perfect knowledge of all of that, and ours is always fallible. So whereas God knows the workings of the universe in terms of law, right, the universals, the things that govern, and knows it perfectly, we don't, right? And particularly the universe as understood in medieval times, with all the various spheres and intellects, are very strange. Anybody who's read the opening of Mishneh Torah will be familiar with the rather strange cosmological setup of medieval times. There's a lot of stuff that is beyond our ken, that God can know. And yes, similarly, how does petitional prayer work? Are we changing God's will, and was that predetermined? So again, that gets into far larger, more problematic questions for medieval rationalists, but the idea that petitional prayer would change God's mind in some way is not something that these thinkers are generally given to, right? So petitional prayer becomes about something else, rather than about changing God's mind, so to speak. Yeah, obviously a lot more would need to be said about that to fully answer the question, but that's a whole nother hour. And would Rabbi say God has confidence in what individuals do? Rabbi himself wouldn't, because he doesn't know individuals, right? So as I said, the broader conception whereby this is just one instance, him not knowing future contingencies, is one instance of him not really knowing anything about individuals at all. So I'm not sure the idea of confidence in knowledge about individuals would particularly come into it. Here we go. There is an answer to this, an alternative answer to this question. And there's a comment there from Chaim that brings this into focus. If God is beyond time, right, if God doesn't exist within time, then the idea of him knowing something beforehand is kind of irrelevant, right? There is no beforehand for God, because he's independent of time. So we don't have a problem, right? Can God know before? Well, before or after doesn't apply to God. So yeah, that's an answer given by Chasbai Kreskas in one little comment that he gives, that the solution to this question is a timeless God. Also, Aquinas has that view as well. I would say, personally, I'm not sure that that solution works, right? Mainly because when God knows it seems less relevant than the fact that it's true, right? Truths don't exist in time anyway, really, about those things, right? When was it true that? What do you mean, true the truth, right? So the idea that God knows it all and it's all laid out before him simultaneously, not in time, I don't think would solve the problem, because it would still be true. And all you need to generate the problem is the truth of the statement. What else do we have? Why should we accept preconception of the past, resting in premise 2 of the argument? Oh gosh, all right, so that's coming from somebody who knows their philosophy. It's a good question, but not one I can deal with now without sending everybody to sleep or dashing off immediately. But we can talk about that anon. I think it's a genuine thing, but it is certainly the part of the argument that people sometimes get, they know this. Right, and more about God outside of time. what if God's omniscient allow man multiple possible outcomes that he has empowered man to choose to afford man the being of sentimental kin? Yeah, that would be fine. Again, wouldn't change the fact God doesn't know what you're going to do, just gives us a good reason for it, right? So it gives us an additional reason for the importance of having these various different possibilities. Okay, we've gone 50 minutes rather than 45, but hey, you know, lots of questions and interesting ones. And Yoel, is that you asking that question? So yeah, I guess I'll leave it there. Thank you, everybody, for, you know, if Rynhold is correct, you know, actually choosing to do this of your own accord. As I say, I commend you, and please do, you know, don't be a stranger. You can come along, join us, get more of this nonsense, or, you know, other more interesting topics, should you be so inclined. But thank you all very much for attending and coming tonight, and I hope you got something out of it. Okay.